Hey everyone, it's the holiday season. As you know, at Addressing Gettysburg, we like to give you one free full Patreon episode per week from the previous year. During the month of December, you're going to hear episodes that our patrons said were their favorites. And we hope that you realize that there's a lot of work that goes into bringing Gettysburg to you, and maybe one of your New Year's resolutions will be to support Addressing Gettysburg by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. But whether you do or not, we appreciate your listens all year long, and we look forward to bringing the history of Gettysburg and the Civil War to you through the year of 2025. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and from our family here at Addressing Gettysburg to yours, we wish you a happy, healthy, and food-filled holiday and a prosperous new year. Enjoy this episode from patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking about a book, another book. And this book is new, and it's called We Fought at Gettysburg, First-Hand Accounts by the Survivors of the 17th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry. It's written by our friend Carolyn Ivanoff, and it just recently came out. But I think I got my copy, I think, before it was released. Is that not correct?
Yeah, you got it from me. Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm special and I get mine.
Oh, you're so special, Matthew.
That's exactly the way my mother would have said it, very sarcastically, but and using my full name to let me know that I'm an idiot. So,
keep in mind that
I'm sorry.
Time she was a teacher.
She was a teacher. Yeah, I know. Right. She knows how to give it back. And that voice that you heard is someone new to Addressing Gettysburg, Jim Connery, licensed battlefield guide. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
We kind of snookered you into joining us here. You just came to observe because you're a friend of Carolyn, and I said, well, you're a guide. You're wearing the jacket. You got the hat. You're sitting in with us. So
Thank you.
Sorry to conscript you, but here you are. All right. What was it that made you want to write this book about this regiment?
Well, first of all, we're Fairfield County people, and it's a Fairfield County regiment in Connecticut. And for many years, I was aware that a lot of these guys lived among us, obviously long gone, but we knew where their houses were, and we knew a lot of their contributions to our towns and our county. And one day, a while ago, this is all in the book, a woman came up to Shelton High School, where I was working as a housemaster, and she brought with her 42 letters from a guy named Selah Blakeman, who ultimately lived in Shelton. And so that was my first real introduction to the 17th Connecticut. And I became fascinated. I did a program for the Historical Society. And I also went to the Bridgeport Public Library, which housed a 13-volume manuscript of many, many accounts that were gathered by William Warren, Private in Company C. And he wanted to write a regimental history and never did. And so this massive, sprawling 13-volume set, some of the volumes they're all bound. Some of the volumes are all handwritten. Some of them he actually tried to type in anticipation of publication. And one was a book with about 200 photographs that he had reprinted through the cyanotype process. If you remember when you were in art class, they would give you blue paper and you'd put leaves on it and, and you'd make a print. Well, that's how he printed these photos. So I was always fascinated by this. And over the years, went back and forth. Occasionally I'd look for something in the manuscript. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine, Kevin Drake, who is the head of Gettysburg Publishing. I've known him for a long time. And I said, hey, we're talking about Gettysburg. Of course. What else are we talking about?
Right.
So I said, hey, Kev, come on. What are you doing this afternoon? Let's go run down to Bridgeport Public Library and take a look at this manuscript. He said, you've never seen anything like it before. In fact, I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like it before. It's quite unusual. And so we go down there, and the archivist pulls out all the volumes. And it's a terrible mess. And we're looking at it, and he starts to flip through the pages. He's like, holy shit. And I'm like, yeah, really? And I said, this would make a hell of a book. And he goes, okay, why don't you write it? And I think that was 2017 or 2018. And he offered me a contract and was very patient with me. And it took me, I think, about 4 years to truly get something into the form you see it now. And then, of course, with the delays, the COVID delays and all of this, that certainly impacted the timeline. But ultimately, it's what you see here.
I've always wondered, and I don't, but I'm just curious. So when, I know, like, if you're, I don't know why this, Tom Brokaw, I don't know why that came to my mind. But if you're Tom Brokaw and you go to Simon & Schuster, they give you a contract. They also give you an advance.
Yeah.
Did they do that on the smaller publications, or is it just a
Absolutely not.
So it's a contract. You write this book on your own time. When you get it finished, we'll put it out there, and then once we've recovered whatever, then you get X amount, right?
Right. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Once he recovers his so I have to sell X amount of volumes before I even get a royalty.
Sure.
But I was amazed that anybody would, one, offer me a contract. I mean, I didn't have to go with my hat in my hand to anybody. He was on board with the project, which was remarkable. And as you can see by the volume, he really believed in the project and put an awful lot into it. There are about 400 pictures in the book, all of which are crisp and clean. The paper quality is excellent. He didn't cheap out on the paper.
No, not at all. Very nice.
Certainly could have. And I think he decided to go with a hardcover, which I was surprised about. And
it's a beautiful cover too.
Yeah, thank you. He gave me a lot of leeway in working. Obviously he has to work with somebody very professional, a cover designer, et cetera, et cetera. But essentially what you see here is what I wanted on the cover. And I was very lucky that he liked my ideas and decided to go with almost all of what I suggested. So I was pleased. I was really pleased beyond, I thought I was going to get a paperback and it was going to be,
chintzy.
But I'm also getting a lot of information from people. The book just came out. People who are looking through it that like it.
Yeah,
they really like it.
Yeah, well, it's very would the word be comprehensive? I think. I mean, if you just look here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 appendices, then notes, bibliography, all that stuff. Even in about the author section.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yes, it's about 2 lines.
Right. Yeah. But like if you look at, so the appendices are Colonel Noble's history of the 17th Connecticut Regiment. Then Appendix B is the regimental roster. Appendix C is Major Brady's official report of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 4th, 1863. Appendix D is alternate maps for the Brickyard Lane deployment. Appendix E, who was William Warren? Appendix F, William Warren's photographic index of the regiment. So, it's like you can get a full picture of these guys, literally, with all the pictures.
Right.
But also, the story, the detail. I've read, we're basing this interview off of chapters 4 and 5.
Okay.
And, just chapter 4, you're given basically what they went through during the battle on the first day. And then chapter 5 are accounts from the guys.
In their own words.
Right. And it's, you said that they were edited, but they're essentially complete, right?
Yes.
Yes. It's not just like you're taking 2 or 3 lines from a larger account, like is often done. And you do that in chapter 4 to accentuate a point or something like that. But then we get to actually read them in context of what they wrote. And I like that because it's a fuller picture. And it's also, what's interesting to me is to see their perception of what it is they're witnessing and in certain things in relation to other units maybe, or generals or whatever, that they're observing as all this chaos is going on. It's really interesting.
I think thank you. I think I really want them to have their say, but I had to frame their remarks in a way that, and I didn't want, look, I know that there are going to be descendants reading this who know nothing about Gettysburg.
Right.
I know that there are going to be guys like Jim reading this who have comprehensive knowledge of the battle, and yourself. And so how do you frame firsthand accounts so that you appeal to everyone? Okay, a very broad spectrum. So the accounts are framed, as you mentioned. Chapter 4 is a summary of the first day, in which is interspersed some very brief quotes, and then chapter 5 is the voices of the first day. And so I didn't want to start like the Battle of Gettysburg is a 3-day battle, the biggest battle of the Civil War.
Fought over shoes.
We don't have to do that.
Right.
But I do think that you're right about this is from the bottom up. This is history. This is people like us. There is a fog of war there. But at the same time, I think they have something to contribute to the scholarship of the battle and some very original accounts and perceptions by guys who were actually there.
And we do, of course, the name of the book is We Fought at Gettysburg, so we do cover what they went through July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. But you don't start at July 1st. You go back, I'm assuming, the history of the regiment in Chapter 1, the Fairfield County Regiment.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right.
Then the disaster at Chancellorsville, the hard road to Gettysburg, and then July 1st. When were they mustered in?
They were mustered in September 1862. And
how many did they have on the roll?
1,000.
1,000, like they're supposed to.
1,030 or something, right?
Now they get to Gettysburg.
They got 386 or something.
Yes, 369 men. Okay. 17 officers, 369 men.
Okay, and that's right. If I wrote it, it's right.
At least according to what you wrote.
I used a lot of Busey. If Busey,
Gary Busey.
Yeah. So I used
not Gary Busey.
Not Gary Busey.
No, it's an actor.
No. But Busey and Busey, which who I like,
which everybody should have in their library,
right? And and numbers are. Let me tell you something about numbers. We talked about this before. I don't like numbers.
No.
They obscure so much. Sometimes numbers really obscure the humanity of event.
Yeah.
And they're just something that you can argue about.
I was just talking about this with somebody the other day. They're like, "Oh man, you're really churning out a lot of stuff lately, and doing great and everything." Like, so yeah, I said, but I need a break. Like, mentally, I need a break because I went from looking at numbers, right, and just looking at numbers. Not going any deeper than the number. Yeah. 7,500 dead. And
that's a very low estimate.
I know. And then somewhere along the line, I don't know where, and I think this has to do with just being over 40 and kind of
baby.
Well, no, but I think like...
You just called me your mother. Don't give me that 40 crap.
Well, you're not... No. But I'm saying is something happened in my head when I hit 40. And my heart, I started to be a little more sensitive and actually like care. Oh. And so... now these numbers, I realize that that's not only an individual person who died, but that represents how many dozens of others back home who don't have that person in their life anymore. Right. And it's just all tragedy. It's all depressing. Right. It's all sad. And when you deal with tragedy day in and day out, like eventually you need a break, but I don't know what else I'm interested in. So I got to find another hobby. But anyway, so now... Tell us a little bit about the history of the 17th. So they're not even in service for a year by the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. They've lost 70%-ish, or 60-something% of their men.
Which is typical.
Right, which is
very
normal.
Typical attrition level.
Were they in a lot of battles?
No. They were in... They missed Antietam.
So, okay.
And they wound up in the Mud March, which, was a disaster. And that was... and then... The first time they really saw the elephant was Chancellorsville.
Right.
And Chancellorsville is a disaster. But let me just talk about the origin of the regiment. It's a very unusual Connecticut Regiment. It's the only Connecticut regiment that was formed strictly from...
Keep going. I'm just adjusting the mic.
Strictly from one county. Connecticut's small. Most of the other regiments came from various counties, where you would get a company from one county, a company from another town, on and on and on. And the origin story of the regiment, as I call it, I thought was important, along with the disaster at Chancellorsville, because one, you have an origin. Somebody, a very prominent historian that I asked about the book, because I know nothing about writing a book. I mean, I've authored a lot of articles and things like that, but I never did a full-length book. So I did consult somebody I knew who was a pretty prominent author, and he said, oh, get rid of all this, just start at Gettysburg. And the more I thought about it, I was like, well, nothing springs from nothing.
Right.
I got to spend a few pages setting the stage. And Fairfield County was a big part of all their lives. The Chancellorsville chapter, again, very short. However, when they get to Gettysburg, it's almost deja vu all over again for this 11th Corps Regiment. And so I didn't feel that it would be wise to not use that to scaffold into the Gettysburg story.
Sure, you have to.
Well,
I mean, could you imagine if the movie just started with the first shots of the battle and there's no lead in and it's just like out of nowhere this battle happened? I mean, you got to have a background.
Well, I agree.
Yeah.
Whether it's a book or an article or a movie.
I don't mean to call into question the judgment of this accomplished author you're talking about, but how do you not have a backstory?
I don't know. I think I don't know. I mean, I know the publisher had a vision, and I did too. And it was we had a 13-volume manuscript that I had to wade through. It's like people have seen it. There are people in Gettysburg who have used this manuscript for research. It's unbelievable. And so I decided, in writing this book, I was going to concentrate on the one battle, the big battle, their big moment. So everything was going to be funneled into Gettysburg. And I did not feel that I could begin a battle without some kind of genesis story and some kind of scaffolding into the battle. And so there's 3 short chapters, one of which, of course, is the March to Gettysburg, which I think is pretty interesting. Yeah. You know, they wind up in Emmitsburg on June 30th. And
doesn't one of the guys have a little tryst with one of the girls there or something?
Kind of has a tryst. It's like there was one line in the manuscript. It was something like, oh, yeah, Jimmy, we went to buy bread at the bakery and the girl waited on us and Jimmy corresponded with her and then he married her. And I was like, now, you got to picture this massive, sprawling mess in front of me that I'm trying to whittle into something manageable.
Right.
And I'm like, don't go down that rabbit hole. Don't go down that rabbit hole. And what do? I was like, I just couldn't resist.
Sure.
So what did we do? We run over to Emmitsburg, and I go to the church, and I knew she was Catholic, and I got his pension record, and I got her name, and then I called the Archdiocese of Baltimore, who had her baptism records, and I went to the census records, and then I found her marriage. They sent me her marriage certificate.
Wow.
And then she passed away in Philadelphia, age 35, and she is almost 100. There's a great deal of certainty that she's in an unburied grave, unmarked grave, in the church where she was baptized, where she was married, and where she
had a funeral.
Lays.
Why was she sick? What killed her?
I don't know. I'm presuming, tuberculosis, the twin scourge of, the scourge of the 19th century. But I also think that she had 5 or 6 children.
So it could have been
very
childbirth.
Quickly, and I'm thinking it might have been that too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't locate any kind of death certificate or anything like that. But it's a remarkable story.
Yeah.
This kid, he's a young guy. He's a musician in Company K, and he must have liked what he saw. And on the way back, they go through Gettysburg again. I don't know if on the way as they're marching toward, Lee's army, and I don't know if Jimmy Ansco saw her again, but he certainly must have been a pretty faithful correspondent, and her too, because he winds up down South Carolina, and then in Florida, and then he winds up in Andersonville. Him and his friend Jimmy, they both wind up in Andersonville, and they live, and they're, and he comes back here and he marries her.
So, he marries her after the war?
Yeah, 1866.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 3 years.
Yep.
They're corresponding.
Apparently.
I wonder if I guess they probably didn't see ech other very much.
I don't think they saw each other at all.
Yeah, just that 2 times that they passed through Emmitsburg.
Yeah.
But there's also what is it? Tom Bradley, the guidon guy.
Yeah, the guidon. Oh yes.
What
Tom
happens
Bradley.
with him? I like this story because this is so typical.
Like the Army. Look, we talked about this last time I was here. You're dealing with 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. Okay, as a former high school teacher, high school principal, it's like that's a routine thing for me. So anyway, him and Jimmy, they're at the bakery. They get bread, and a lot of these guys are barefoot. And we don't usually associate the Army of the Potomac with bare feet, but probably almost half of them were.
Yeah.
And so, the night before the battle, they're like, getting something to eat. They're doing whatever they do. It's probably very melancholy. Well, the next morning, the day before, Tommy was looking for shoes. He didn't only want to eat, he also wanted a pair of shoes. Mm-hmm. Well, that morning, he still didn't find a pair of shoes. So as the Army marches away, Tommy's out God knows where looking for a pair of shoes. And he left the guidon stuck in the ground.
Yeah.
And the company marches away. And so Major Brady found it. And if you know anything about Major Brady, very volcanic, volatile guy, good leader, that's who you want to follow in combat. But they did not like him. And so he grabs it out of the ground, and Jimmy catches up, and Brady probably just gives it to him. And then good old Colonel Fowler, takes it from Brady and gives it back to the kid. But Tom, when he writes this down, doesn't say anything about Brady's reaction, just that, Colonel Fowler gave him back the guy. So, the volunteer army of the Civil War is nothing like the army that we know, the professional army that we know today, even though it's still a volunteer army again. But it's some of the things these guys do. It's like, they think nothing of going up to like Colonel Noble when he finally comes back after being wounded at Chancellorsville. He gets here on the night of the 3rd. And the guys see him on the 4th, and they think nothing of going up to the colonel and asking his advice about this or that. Or, you would never approach your colonel and say, well, what should I do, Colonel? Or how's my mother back home?
Right.
And then after on the 4th, I know we're confining ourselves to the first day, but, on July 4th, the 17th is one of the first, maybe the first, that sends squads into town because the Confederates are retreating. And after they get done with picket duty, they just all they want to get something to eat. They wander into people's houses. They meet, and there are a couple of stories there about them. I had lunch with a very pretty girl, and when I left, I kissed her mother. That's one of the stories there. I mean, the discipline that we know today is just, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
These guys had no intention of deserting, but they wandered around after picket duty, and some of them looked at the battlefield and left accounts about what they saw. And, so it's very interesting. And I do think these firsthand accounts, many have never before been published. Almost all of them have not been published. I think they have something to tell us about the battle.
Yeah.
From people like us, not from the top, but from history from the ground up.
Yes.
And I was very interested in a lot that they had to say.
So let's get to the battle then. So what happens? Actually, on the way up, though, what happens to Colonel Fowler?
Well, on the way up, there are very strict orders, and I really kind of pick up with leaving Emmitsburg. Okay, Howard issues his marching orders. His baggage goes to Union Bridge, the Army is stripping itself for battle, and they have to make time. And he gives all of the the divisions and the brigades their marching orders, and they start to move. Mm-hmm. And there's very strict orders. There's no straggling. There's no stopping. They're not stopping for water. They're not anybody who stops for water. It's up to the officers to make sure that the men are closed up. They're on task. They're moving forward. That there's no stopping whatsoever. And of course, these guys are really thirsty, they only have what they have in their sacks and in their canteen and on the way. And this is by no means relative only to the 17th and Colonel Fowler. Discipline is strict, and officers are being arrested constantly as they're heading toward Gettysburg. And one famous example, I know you're aware of it, is, of course, the 13th Vermont, right up there on
Cemetery Ridge.
And Cemetery Ridge, good old Lieutenant Brown standing on the hatchet because they took his sword away because his men stopped for water and he got arrested and he wasn't happy about it, but he redeemed himself. And so one of the 17th, I don't know who it was, stopped and dipped his cup in a stream, so the account goes, and Fowler was arrested. And he had to go to the back of the line. He had to surrender his sword to Chaplain Hall, and the men were infuriated. And so he says what so many of them do: don't worry, if there's going to be a battle, and they know there's going to be a battle because they can probably hear it from where they are, or they can probably hear the rumbling of the artillery. So the First Corps is engaged, and he says, "Don't worry, I'll be leading you into battle if there's a battle, because of course the guys are threatening. We're not going to advance without you. We're not going anywhere without you." And so he reassures them and goes to the back of the line.
You talking about the approach of battle, you have a quote here from Private Peyton of Company A.
Yep.
He said, "The next hour was a trying one to the men of weak nerves, and many a poor soldier expressed in his blanched face a fear that would blush to speak. For there are none so brave, but at the approach of battle feel a vague sense of impending danger and perhaps death. The bravado and bluster of camp life is all gone in the face of the enemy, and it is a remarkably courageous man that can look into the mouth of a 12-pound Parrott gun or the muzzles of a regiment or a regiment of infantry and not feel a quiver of fear. For my part, I felt that sense of uneasiness that is born of uncertainty, and I wonder what would be my fate and how I should acquit myself in the struggle that was so near at hand." So it sounds like you hear the battle coming, and even the most braggadocious guy might get a little quiet and.
Yep. And don't forget, Chancellorsville had been a disaster for these guys. So This isn't their first rodeo.
Right.
And in that regard, I think that maybe it was worse for them. They knew what to expect. Chancellorsville had been a bad experience. And they know it's going to happen again, and it's going to be bad. At the same time, there are many of these guys who, and they're expressed sporadically throughout, several short quotes, that they want hunk for Chancellorsville. They're not going to run again. And at the same time, they're really worried. Many of them express that their biggest fear is being taken prisoner, believe it or not. So, yes, I think there's a terrible apprehension as they hear the sounds of battle, and they know that they are going from marching column to the battle line.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be any respite.
Yeah. All right. So get us into the battle now. So they're on the scene. Where are they positioned?
Well, they come through town. Something none of them will ever forget is that the townspeople are handing out water as they march through water and food. And these guys are famished and they're thirsty and they're nervous. And they will never forget this.
Yeah. You have one story about a guy who the lady of the house asks if they're hungry, and they say yes, and she runs into the cellar and gets cherry pie.
Yep, and they never forgot that.
No, and later after the war, when they come back for the monument dedication, he and his wife seek her out. Yep. They go to the house. She's not there anymore. The current owners say, oh, she lives in another part of town. They find her. They, I guess, leave a note or something that they called on her, and then the woman and her couple and her husband, I guess, go to the hotel and find the veteran and his wife.
Yeah. So this is something they'll never forget, and they're very grateful for. But they're rolled right out. Of course, everybody knows the story. General Barlow is very, very aggressive. He rolls them right out. He sees, that Knoll there. And, I look, Barlow wasn't a trained, very brave man. And he was very aggressive. And he, I think he comes off the Gettysburg plain and he sees this rise and he thinks, aha, good position, artillery platform. Mm-hmm. And he's got Wilkinson's 4 guns. And they begin dueling, and the next thing you know what? If you're on a good platform for artillery, you're also a great target for artillery. And Dole's artillery is coming down from Oak Knoll, and Jones rolls his out over by the Lutheran Convalescent Home, if you've ever been down there. And, 4
That's
guns.
Hillary Jones of the Second Corps, Confederate Second Corps.
I believe so, yeah. Don't quote me on numbers or, what does John Banks say? Do you know John?
Don't quote me on people.
Don't quote me on, no, he says,
I'm saying, I don't know.
Don't quote me on left flank, right flank. I'm not a left flank, right flank type guy. Well, I'm not a left flank,
no, but
right
I just didn't want to confuse the listener. Jones is our artillery battalion in the Confederate Army.
Correct. So, obviously those 4 guns are they're just going to start taking a beating.
Sure.
And Wilkinson is very brave, and now there's the placard out there. They took J. Henry Blakeman off the sign out at Barlow's Knoll, and now they have young Wilkinson about how he. And by the way, I don't believe he
cut his own leg off.
Cut his own leg off.
No, I don't think that happened.
I don't think so. But they have him and his father, of course, they're out there on the placard, and it's such a sad story. Amid thousands of sad stories. And, the young 19-year-old dies at the almshouse, and his father is, forever wounded over this. And, makes a case for, in the New York Times, for which he's a correspondent, Senior Wilkinson says that, there were a battery had no business being, or an artillery group had no business being, obviously blaming the command, Barlow. And a lot of people today believe, Barlow pulled his sickles on the first day. And probably, very brave man, and he certainly paid for his courage. But it's an unfortunate position. And the Barlow's men are caught in a vise. They're probably outnumbered 3-1, maybe 3.5-1. Here we go with the numbers again. But it's a no-win situation for the Union boys.
It is a tough situation, but there they are anyway. So the 17th is kind of split up a little bit. Yes. 4 companies are sent across Rock Creek.
Right. They're at the Benner Farm in the orchard. One of the reasons I used Major Brady's report is because it really details a lot of the movement, and I thought it gave a frame to the structure of the battle. And like you say, these guys, they only can see what's in front of them. They only know what's in front of them. That's what they're writing about. But obviously that fog of war is going to really be affecting them.
Sure.
And Brady, I think, with his report, does a good job of trying to lay out the movements of the regiment. so that you can follow it to a certain degree. I mean, I'm sure there are mistakes there, but he does a very good job. And he is leading 4 companies of the 17th Connecticut. 6 companies remain on the Knoll, Barlow's Knoll, with Colonel Fowler. And Brady has 4 regiments down in the Benner Orchard. They probably are the furthest out from any regiment engaging the Confederates of the battle.
Yeah. And they have a pretty hot fight out there.
They have a pretty hot fight out there, and when they're finally recalled, Brady is very successful in getting them to withdraw. You know, withdrawal is always a tough situation. Gets them to withdraw across the bridge, and it gets them into town. And there's some really stunning accounts about, the gun that was loaded in town that somebody rips the cord on and it blows through the Confederates. And, I mean, it was a tough retreat.
Yeah.
And Brady manages to do with his 4 companies, retreat with his 4 companies pretty much intact. The rest of the 17th is really scattered. They're like running for their lives for the most part, and until they get to East Cemetery Hill. It's a terrible first day. It's a terrible repeat, perhaps, of the Chancellorsville issue, where unfortunately they were at the far right of the Army, and nobody would listen to them saying at Chancellorsville that there were Confederates out there, on and on. There was adequate notification of the men on the front lines trying to send information back to their leadership, their generals, that something was not right. I mean, and it certainly wasn't with Stonewall Jackson flanking them.
Yeah.
And then Jackson just rolls them up in a very eerily similar situation to what's going to happen to them again on Barlow's Knoll.
While they're on Barlow's Knoll, and Jim, jump in whenever you want.
Can I just interrupt, Matt? Barlow's Knoll, I mean, there's some controversy. A couple of people have asked me, why are you calling it Barlow's Knoll? It's Blocker's Knoll.
Right.
Yes, it's Blocker's Knoll because he was the landowner. He was the farmer that owned it. But I call it Barlow's Knoll because in their accounts, that's what the men call it. And so, I didn't want to confuse the situation.
But it's also Barlow's Knoll here now,
right.
Officially.
Right.
So when you come here, it says Barlow's Knoll. It doesn't say Bloker's Knoll or Blocker's Knoll.
I'm going to tell you, the guys themselves consistently used Barlow's Knoll in their writings, and so I continued that because I have had a couple of questions about that. And I think a lot of it is, Barlow's even today is not the most popular person in the
Channing. I don't like Channing.
You don't like Channing?
No.
I'm going to tell you, he was a very interesting character. He's a very brave man.
Well, he may be, but I don't like him.
Okay, well, a lot of other people don't like him either, and hence the question, why aren't you calling it Blocker's Knoll? Because the guys themselves called it.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with it being called Barlow's Knoll, but I just have a problem with him. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't tell Andrea Quinn. Do you know Andrea Quinn?
I do not.
She loves him. And she's a friend of mine, and she's writing a biography on him. He hasn't had a biography in many years, and she's just obsessed with him. And when she said to me, "Well, Barlow this, Barlow that," and I said to her, "Oh, Andrea, he was a very brave man, but and she's a great person, believe me." And I said, "But he's just, he's a very brave man, but he's an elitist wasp with mommy issues."
Exactly.
And she says to me, "Oh, well, just don't hold anything back, But
Tell
and
us how you really feel.
He was an elitist wasp,
yes,
and But
I mean, he throws his own men under the bus.
I'm very ambivalent about him as a commander, and unfortunately, it was not a good day for Francis Channing Barlow.
No, it was not.
And consequently, it was not a good day for many in the 11th Corps.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. The 17th, back on Barlow's Knoll. So, Lieutenant Colonel Fowler is on a white horse.
Yes.
Which is as if being on a horse on a hill isn't a target enough. Your horse is white.
Right.
And, of course, he's not alone on the horse. He's got, I'm assuming, his staff nearby or around him.
I think probably they all dismounted except for the adjutant.
Okay.
I think they all dismounted. As far as I can tell, I don't know. But, yes.
That would be Chatfield, right? Lieutenant Chatfield?
Yes. And there is a quote in there from Lieutenant Peck that, the officers surrounded Fowler and, begged him to get off the horse, and he wouldn't do it. Now, this is a repetitive theme at Gettysburg. You have Isaac Avery down here. He won't get off his horse. You have 124th New York, Ellis. Won't get off his horse. The men must see us today.
Yes.
And they're very adamant about leading their men from the front.
Yeah,
the men must see us today.
Yeah, well.
Fowler paid for it dramatically.
The men see you, and so do the enemy.
Yes, they do.
All right, so how does he die?
Well, apparently, the regiment comes under fire. They're all nervous, young boys, and
how old's Fowler?
Fowler is in his 30s.
Okay.
He's a widower. He's from Norwalk. He had been with the 3rd Connecticut at Bull Run. He had been with the 8th Connecticut, resigned, and then took a 3-year stint and a commission with the 17th Connecticut when they were formed in '62. And he's a good guy. The men love him, and after his death, they're going to really love him even more. But his death is spectacular and dramatic in a way that they're never going to forget for the rest of their lives. He is decapitated after he orders them forward. He's decapitated probably by a shell. There are different accounts of his wounds. His brother believed it took his head off above his jaw. Jeez. So horrific. And they're all witnessing this. Yeah. And almost immediately, the regiment is under such intense fire that Captain French is immediately wounded. Captain Moore had been killed slightly before Fowler, shot in the head twice. Lieutenant Quinn is wounded. So it's just like a massive assault. Mm-hmm. You've got the men in line, in battle line, and I know for my 4 guys from Stratford and Shelton, one volley is going to, they're 4 friends, shoulder to shoulder. One volley is going to kill one outright, wound 2 horribly, and leave 1 standing. So the odds are not good.
No.
In those very few minutes.
Was it Gordon who said that he was surprised that anybody was able to escape?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's Gordon to give credence to the lies about the 11th Corps, who says, I quote, some of the Confederate generals who talk about how bravely the Yankees stood.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think most people would agree that part of the 17th that was on the Knoll, the 6 companies, and the 75th Ohio, which I call the sister regiment, they did indeed try to make a brief but futile stand. So they weren't running outright. That's a bald-faced lie. But they were just, so outnumbered and so overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean,
that
if you
there was no choice but to retreat very quickly.
Of course, if you look at a map, with the troop positions on it and everything like that, it is amazing that they were able to withstand as long as they did, let alone escape.
Yeah.
and it's overwhelming. The ground is not good.
The ground is horrible.
It's terrible ground to try to hold with so few men. So I mean, yeah, they may not have. They definitely retreated and fell back, but it wasn't a rout. It was, they tried to organize and delay. And,
they tried. They tried very hard. Ames really does try to form a second line. I mean, there are a couple of accounts there. Tries to form that second line at the almshouse. They do try again, but they just get overwhelmed.
Now, while the retreat is going on, how did the 17th do?
Well, there are a bunch of accounts that they're trying to keep together. They're trying. I mean, most of them just try to run for their lives. I mean, they've got to get through the streets of Gettysburg, the alleys, the byways. It's just a mess.
And they came up Washington Street, right?
Well, here, I think
they were going in.
When they were going in, yeah, I think they were on Washington Street. I won't swear to that.
I hope you're sure because you're saying in the book.
I know. But I believe they were on Washington Street. They got out to Barlow's on the Harrisburg Road though. I'm sure they were on the Harrisburg Road at one time as they were forming.
The reason I asked was,
did they come back probably on Carlisle?
That's the reason I asked was because they're coming back on unfamiliar roads now. Right. And so now, not only do they have to, get away from the Rebs, but they got to find which is the right way to go.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So they probably used Carlisle. Carlisle is usually considered the escape route. And then the other road I believe they used, especially for the wounded, was Stratton. And Stratton comes right up to the German Reformed Church, which was being used as a Levin Corps hospital, which many of the wounded are going to leave accounts of being at. That and the school next door. Gettysburg school next door.
The public school.
Right.
Yeah. Now, so when those who make it get to Cemetery Hill, where are they placed? Who places them? What are they? How do they end the first day?
Well, they end the first day probably facing Baltimore Street, and according to a couple of the accounts, it is General Howard who places them himself on that. They're somewhere near. This is from Tim Smith and Gary Edelman, and I wrote in the book that sometimes the monuments don't always place these guys where they are, but I believe on July 4th they wind up facing Baltimore Street, probably in the vicinity of where the hotel is now.
July 4th or
July
1st?
1st.
Okay,
sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, well, that would make sense.
Yeah. So they're facing the town.
But that's not where the monument is.
No, the monument is down on the old Brickyard Lane.
Now, I think one of the accounts said that they were posted on the hill near where the reservoir is today.
Right.
And of course, he's talking about his day.
By that water tower.
Which is where the water tower is today.
Right.
Jim, the reservoir, was that not a pre-battle reservoir?
Right.
I've not read anything specific about it, but it's likely that that's the case. It's the high ground in the area.
Yeah.
And where are people going to get their water?
Right.
Either out of the Weinbrenner Run or hand-dug wells or something up higher up to
the reservoir was not
by
there.
Gravity.
It was not there. Because I thought I remember reading, or maybe Tim Smith told me this, that, John Brown, one of the jobs that he had was with the waterworks. And the John Burns, excuse me. And
we all do that.
I know. And the water would be pumped, that pump by the Rupp House, that would be pumped up to the reservoir on the hill. But is that a post-war?
It could well be.
Okay.
It could well
Okay. So he worked for the waterworks, but he wasn't necessarily pumping water up to the hill at that time.
The question comes up all the time, where are all these people getting their water?
Yeah.
With thousands of soldiers around, the hand-dug wells are going to evaporate pretty quickly.
They went dry.
I would imagine if there was a reservoir on the top of the hill, the Cemetery Hill would be much more valuable than it was. Yeah. And it was pretty valuable already.
These guys, when they're in line here, they get their water. They mention Menchie Spring, which is always on the maps. And then there's another spring called Raffensperger Spring.
Yes.
That's where I believe they're getting their water. Although one of them does mention in the account on the second day that Menchie Spring. But other spring was probably closer to their position, Raffensperger Spring.
Okay.
And I do believe it's one of those two springs, but they were getting their water from a spring at that time. I think they were too far away from the run.
Yeah, they would have been.
They do mention
very close to the Confederate line at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, we know that the Avery's, Tar Heels, and the Louisiana fellows on the morning of the 2nd are going to move into that stream bed below where the school is today. So access to that water would have been difficult.
Over East Confederate Avenue goes over it now. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Is it what run is that? Is that Weinbrenner's?
Yeah.
That is Weinbrenner's. Okay. So they end the day there. They have a skirmish line a little further up in town.
And they're immediately under fire, under sharpshooting fire from all of the houses on Baltimore.
Yeah.
And it's a very terrible situation that goes on until the 4th,
right,
when the Confederates start to withdraw, and they call it the sniper fire. It's like maddening, and it's frightening, and they're shooting too. You know, my favorite story is, do you know the Brick House bed and breakfast on Baltimore?
Yeah.
Well, the Welty House is the second structure next to that. They use that as a bed and breakfast too. That's a contemporary Civil War building, and it's said that the Confederates in the Welty House were firing down on the 17th Connecticut. You know,
and that's close to where they would have been.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it's every house on Baltimore. I think I know we're supposed to be concentrating on the first day, but you know, there's further down in the accounts in the book, there are accounts of the maddening fire that they experienced for the next 3 days.
Yeah, and that's what the listeners are going to have to get the book and find out for themselves.
Oh, yes, buy the book.
I mean, we could go through the whole book now, but then no one has a reason to buy it. So,
well, I think some of the accounts, if we're going to concentrate on the first day, I think some of the accounts in the first day are going to be interesting if you're a first day aficionado, not necessarily 11th Corps aficionado, but if you're a first day aficionado, I think that there are some very interesting first day accounts in the book, and you know, I was fascinated with them, and that's why I put them there.
Yeah. Well, here's an account from Major Brady. About this time, Major General Howard, who was in the thickest of the battle, regardless of danger, asked if he had troops brave enough to advance to a stone wall across a lot toward the town, and said he would lead them. We replied, yes, the 17th Connecticut will, and advanced at once to the place indicated, remained a few moments, and again advanced across another lot still nearer to the town and behind a rail fence at the upper end of the town, which position we held until late in the evening, exposed to a galling fire from the enemy's sharpshooters, when the whole regiment was ordered out on picket and performed that duty until 2 o'clock of the second instant. There was a detail of 100 men for picket from our regiment. This is from Lieutenant Peck now. 100 men from our regiment that night, but we were unable to furnish the full detail. I was on the detail as subordinate. Do not remember what other officer was with us. We were posted in an apple orchard close to the edge of town with our vedettes posted along a board and rail fence. We were ordered to be very watchful and vigilant as our troops were expecting to make an attack on the town that night. I don't think I got any sleep that night. And you point out that he was not the only sleepless soldier. They didn't make an attack on the town, but that was what they thought. And so there they are, awake on guard.
I think that chapter ends with just a brief story about one of the soldiers. He's like trying to find the regiment. These guys were all over the place. He comes running in, and he says he passes the bar or hotel, right?
Yeah.
And
was that what he meant by the bar?
Yeah, I don't know. Is that here?
No, I just read that whole thing. I'll find it. Go ahead.
So he ends the night, and the guys do see him trying to run into the lines, and they're waving him on, and they're hooting and hollering and hoping he gets there, and he makes a mad dash And I think he was talking about the Wagon Hotel, and he makes a mad dash, and he does make it into the lines, and so he serves the rest of the battle out there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find here. I know I read that, and I was like, the bar. What is he talking about? The bar. I thought it was like a military term that I wasn't familiar with.
No, I think it was the Wagon Hotel, and they did find out that there was liquor at the Wagon Hotel. They were trying to hide it, I believe, but.
Yeah, but here's the thing about the reservoir. This is from who's it? Second Lieutenant Peck. We were soon cut to pieces. We fell back into the town where we met our skirmishers and formed in the side street for a while, but we did not remain there long as the rebel force was too strong for us, and we fell back to Cemetery Hill and reformed along a stone wall near where the reservoir now stands. But with a fragment of our regiment left, I can tell you the loss of my brave Colonel of the brave Colonel Fowler and Captain Moore took some of the zeal out of our boys for a while, and when we were ordered forward after reforming on the hill, there was a little hesitation until I think General Howard took our colors and moved forward, and our boys followed with a cheer.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know where I saw that, but
Well,
you know what? Buy the book and find it yourself. There you go.
Yeah.
It's a little.
I think
little
he's talking
quest.
about the Wagon Hotel, and there were Union sharpshooters in the Wagon Hotel.
All right. So, Chapter 5 has accounts from the soldiers, if not in their entirety, mostly in their entirety. What I've got two here that I thought were good. They're the first two, and that's Warren and Daniels on page 56 and 60.
One is a private, and one is a lieutenant. Or he's going to be captain right after the battle.
Yep.
And that was 55 and 60. And Warren. Again, Warren is the man who compiled this massive manuscript, saved every scrap of paper for, 60 years. And he talks about his role in the first day's battle. He talks about the 4 regiments peeling off to go to the Benner Farm. And he talks about how he gets struck in the back by a spent bullet, and he is convinced, absolutely and it must have hurt like hell. He's absolutely convinced he's wounded and he's bleeding. I think it just gave him a hell of a pounding. And he also meets Rufus Warren. They are not related, by the way. Rufus Warren is pretty much mortally wounded.
Yeah, there's a paragraph here from Warren's account that I wanted to read here. He says, I was so exhausted that I had difficulty in arriving at the protection, where I threw myself on the ground more dead than alive. Right. I found an officer there wounded in the back also, a member of the 153rd Pennsylvania, who was wounded in the right leg below the knee. He was very weak from loss of blood in crossing the field and said to me, my wound is a bad one, and I could see it was. Horses and men kept coming in while I lay there. One horse in particular attracted my attention, an artillery horse having all his harness on and a deep bad wound in him from which the blood was running profusely. It pained him so he could not stand still, but a moment at a time. So on he went, and that was the last I saw of him. The rebel skirmishers... Hey, Jessie Weedleton, how are you? Jessie Weedleton just popped her head in. Come on in. The rebel skirmishers and line of battle were steadily advancing while the bullets were coming thicker and faster. We soon found that our protection was of little avail, and we must soon leave that position or run the risk of being killed, for the battle was growing more and more fierce all the time. I therefore decided to move still further back and made for a barn shed about 2 rods away, leaving the officer to look out for himself. I reached the shed in safety and was soon joined by James Hannon, who came back in saying, "Hello, Bill."
Yeah, right. They were really saying that in the middle of battle.
"Hello, Bill. You here?" "Yes," I replied, "and wounded in the back, and I can feel the blood run." So There's a little bit of that there that I liked. And then who's the other one? Daniels.
Daniels, yes. Daniels is the one that was with Captain Moore the night before. Moore had like that premonition of death.
Yes.
And
did he die?
He certainly did.
He certainly
was
did.
Shot twice in the head and immediately died. And by the way, the 17th Connecticut stone, placed in 1884, is reputedly where Captain Moore lost his life. That's the placement of the stone, reputedly.
Okay.
And the flagpole, placed in 1885, is presumably where Fowler was struck and killed.
Now, the flagpole, what is the story with that? Because that's like, what was it maintained for a while? Like, people, do they still? I don't even know.
Yes,
They still. Go ahead. Tell me the story.
Okay, so I was going to bring that up anyway because you're invited to a special flag raising on July 1st.
Oh, very nice.
So I will send you the information.
Please do, so I don't forget.
But the flagpole was erected in 1885. It was at first a wooden pole. Structurally it came down in a storm. They ultimately put the metal pole up, I think, in the 20s. But the regiment always donated funds to maintain it. And Farmer Blocker would raise the flag, the national flag, for them on various occasions, sometimes daily, sometimes on special occasions. They awarded him with a beautiful plaque in 1889, which will be at this special flag raising for the 160th.
Where's that been all this time?
Dave Malgi owns it.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And so he will bring that with him. He's going to be a speaker.
Dave's got the coolest collection.
I know he does. And so anyway, the flagpole did for a while fall into disrepair. The flag was still flying in the early 60s when Celia Blakeman's niece finally liquidated the 17th Connecticut Survivors Association funds to the tune of like $900 and sent it to the Gettysburg Preservation, Battlefield Preservation, GBPMA, whatever the hell that is. And
I can't keep up with all that.
And so anyway, the flagpole fell into disarray. It was not being used. It was a mess. In 2017, the reenacting group that I am a member of, Company F, 14th Connecticut, we got together with Bob Anglovic, and Jim's a member of the flag team, and we got together with some locals, and we got together with the National Park Service, and we donated all the funds to refurbish it.
Oh, good.
So we had a special 155th flag raising on July 1st, 2018. And since then, we have a flag team. And the team Barlow, Knoll, the flag team, has a permit. You must have a permit to do anything in the park.
Yep.
We have a permit that allows us to fly the flag one weekend a month, weather permitting.
Oh, okay.
And so we have a group of people that, Jim, myself, various others around town are committed to raising the flag 1 week a month, one weekend a month, as our permit allows. And so,
why only one weekend?
This is what we.
That's all they allow.
That's what we work with.
Okay.
Yeah. And we need, you need manpower and things like that.
Sure.
So that's
probably hard enough to get 1 weekend done.
That's what our permit allows. Now, for the 160th, I did apply for permits and they were granted. We are going to have a special flag raising. It's going to be a half hour. The superintendent says he's going to be there.
Nice.
We're going to have a brief ceremony. We'll start to gather around 8:30. We are going to have a series of 3 to 5 minute talks. A lot of stakeholders around town. Adams County Historical, Tim Smith is going to say a few words. Superintendent will say a few words. Gettysburg Roundtable will say a few words. Dave Malgi certainly will represent the foundation to say a few words, and he'll have that artifact there. It will be a half-hour ceremony, a special flag raising. We'll have a bugler, and we will have a violinist do a violin solo for the Star Spangled Banner instead of the traditional singing. and then the flag will fly over the battlefield the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of the 160th anniversary.
Very good.
So you are invited. I will get you the
Thank you.
information.
I'll go.
We haven't really published it yet. It will be a very brief way to honor the 160th anniversary and to do something special and then give everybody a chance to go on their merry way, because I know it's one of the busiest days of the year.
How is the book doing so far?
The book is doing well. As you know, it just came out, and people are getting it in dribs and drabs. I know it's being distributed. I know it's on Amazon, and I'm getting some nice comments.
I'm
really
hearing a lot of good things about it.
Thank you.
Our buddy Mike Lentz loved it.
I know. Thank you. I love Michael.
He's a voracious reader.
He is, and he gave me some props on the way it was constructed or laid out.
Yeah.
And he said he really liked the way the accounts were framed and introduced. And I think at first there's a perception that it might be like a regimental history. It is absolutely not a regimental history.
No.
And like I say, some of the accounts are, I think, extremely interesting, things that I've never read before. And also, when we talk about the accounts of the 17th Connecticut, how many thousands of guys here experienced what these guys are trying to
I'm sure very similar experiences all throughout the armies, both armies.
Right.
The other one I would say to people to pay attention to when you get the book is Corporal Aaron Lee, because he writes from a hospital in Philadelphia, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yep.
His whole experience there. Carolyn, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Always fun to talk to you. Jim, thanks for throwing in a couple of words there every once in a while. It's nice to meet you very
maybe
much.
We'll put one together for the 20th Connecticut.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Always looking for stuff to do. So if you're willing to come on.
You'll have to call me for that one, too.
Okay.
You know, I already took heat for this because it was like, on Facebook, it was like, well, what about the 20th? Well, the book is about the 17th.
Right. Oh,
sorry.
Really? Don't you hate that?
I'm sorry. I know I'm a Connecticut chick,
yeah.
but, come on.
I love when I see a comment on, like, one of our shows on YouTube or something, and somebody goes, why didn't you talk about the blah, 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 blah? And it's like, because we're talking about the flah, 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 flah. Like, we're not talking about the blah, blah.
Well,
why don't you do your own show? Why don't you write your own book?
Well,
people.
I don't know. But anyway, thank you for letting me know. I hope the book does do well, and so far I've gotten some positive comments. And if you buy a book and read it, please put a review up for me.
Is it at For the Historian?
I believe it is.
I believe I saw it there the other day. In fact, actually, yes, I did see it there.
It was in the window, but it's not in the window any longer.
It's in the stacks there when you first go in. And the kid behind the counter told me that every time we talk about a book on the show, they get like inundated with calls or visits or online orders. So I want to thank the audience for that, because that keeps them wanting to be a sponsor of ours, and that helps. But also that helps our guests, because they're getting sales from that, and that's great. I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised, but surprised nonetheless that something I did worked. And so I'm glad for that.
Thank you so much.
So get it there. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you go there and you mention Addressing Gettysburg, you get a 20% discount. So why wouldn't you get it from them at For the Historian? It's a great book. You'll love it. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, Jesse. And we'll talk to you all next time. What's up, Jess? You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Hi, stranger.
Always welcome.
I really, really enjoy being here.
I do. I love having you.
Hey, one more thing before we go. Did you know that you can now gift a membership to the Gettys Nerd in your family? That's right. You can gift them 1 to 12-month subscription and really help them learn more about the Battle of Gettysburg and the Civil War. So just go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.